Oatmeal Stouts are quite tasty. I'm going to say some variation of that sentence over and over again today, but it's true. They speak to me on a spiritual level. Their murky blackness calls out to my cold, dead heart like a siren song, beseeching me to imbibe their sweet, mysterious essence. Too much? Okay, full disclosure. For our beer and movie pairing today, I'll be talking about New Holland's Oatmeal Stout. It's called The Poet. As a result, I'm going to wax poetic here and there, just to get us in the mood. But don't let my impressive lyrical prowess intimidate you. It's just a natural gift I have. It's really no big deal. So, to get us started, I'll read the decidedly non-poetic overall impression from the BJCP guidelines. They say that an oatmeal stout is a very dark, full-bodied, roasty, malty ale with a complementary oatmeal flavor. The sweetness, balance, and oatmeal impression can vary considerably. To the point, but not very expressive. To put it more melodically, I would say that an oatmeal stout is dark as a dungeon and full as a well-fed tick. Its roast and malt would make an IPA lover sick. With its oatmeal impression all over the map, something, I'm going to take a nap. I'm not very good at poetry. I know I just said that I was, but that was clearly a lie. I find poetry pretentious and self-important, and I'm not trying to be either one of those things. I know I said I was going to do that very thing, but I just don't have it in me. I'm too dead inside to write poetry. Alright, please don't make me do it. Also, as far as oatmeal stouts go, that was a fairly vague description. This is one of those beer styles that isn't super well defined. It's very open to interpretation. I know, just like poetry. Now let that be the last mention of poems, or poets, or poetry, until the movie pairing. I know, we'll talk about an oatmeal stout's characteristic aroma. That'll get us back on track. These beers have an aroma of mild roasted grains, most often with a coffee-like character. That coffee note, along with the light malty sweetness, can give off the impression of coffee and cream. With this being an English style, you can have some fruitiness from the yeast. The guide says the fruit character should be low to medium high, which is a pretty wide range. Diacetyl should be medium low to non-existent. Save for any hop aroma. If you detect any hops in the nose, they'll be earthy or floral. And a light grainy or nutty oatmeal aroma is optional. There is oatmeal in the beer, so it makes sense that you might smell it. Being a stout, this beer will be medium brown to black in color. It will have a thick, creamy, persistent tan to brown colored head. And the guide says that it can be opaque, but if it's not, it should be clear. I'm not sure what it's trying to get across there. If it's not one thing, it should be the other, but it can be either. That's helpful. I guess they're saying it should definitely be one or the other, not anything in between. Whatever. It's a very dark beer, so I don't know how much its clarity really makes a difference. The flavor is going to be similar to the aroma. It would be weird if it was wildly different. You will get a mild roasted coffee flavor, possibly a coffee and cream flavor with varying levels of fruitiness. The oats and dark roasted grains will add to the complexity of the beer. The oats can add a nutty, grainy, or earthy flavor, whereas those dark grains will combine with the malty sweetness to give you that coffee and cream impression, or even a milk chocolate kind of flavor. There will be a medium level of hop bitterness, but the balance will be towards the malt. Hops should taste earthy or floral, but like I said, you won't really get much in the way of hoppiness with an oatmeal stout. The beer will finish medium sweet to medium dry, and you may get a little hint of diacetyl, which, as a quick reminder, it's that off flavor that's like fake butter you get on your popcorn at the movies. The body of an oatmeal stout should be medium full to full. Most will have a smooth, silky, velvety mouthfeel, creamy even. God, that sounds gross. I hear it on this one. I hear how bad a creamy mouthfeel sounds. That's from the oatmeal, that sensation. Sometimes it'll even have an almost oily slickness to it. Yeesh. And it will have medium to medium high levels of carbonation. That description is not appealing at all. It's funny because the mouthfeel of an oatmeal stout is like one of the highlights of the style. It just sounds especially bad when you describe it with words. These beers can be sweet, as I said. The guide says they're generally between a sweet stout and an Irish stout in terms of sweetness, which is such a wide range that it's almost totally meaningless to point it out. It says that variations exist from fairly sweet to quite dry, which is just restating the previous sentence in a slightly different way. And it says that there are English and American versions of the style. American versions, as you may have guessed, are more hoppy, less sweet, and less fruity. The level of bitterness also varies, as does the oatmeal impression. Using just a little bit of oatmeal can give the beer a silky body and a rich flavor. Using a lot of oatmeal will give the beer an intense flavor. And that's also how you get that oily mouthfeel I was talking about before. You also get a more dry finish and a grainy astringency when you use a lot of oatmeal. None of these adaptations are inappropriate or unsuitable for the style. It's just a wide-ranging style that allows for lots of variation. The birth of the oatmeal stout can be traced back to the 1890s. If you remember our episode on English porter, we talked about how stouts started as stout porters, denoting that they were stronger than your average porter. They became their own style over time, and then they started branching off into sub-styles of stouts. Irish stouts were dry, English stouts were sweet, and so on. Some of these stouts tried to stand out from their peers by touting their various health benefits. Milk stouts, what we now call sweet stouts, contain lactose, which was said to be good for mothers who were nursing small children. And oatmeal stouts were said to be particularly good for invalids, in whom the beer's nourishing and strengthening effects were said to produce marvelous results. Now, I probably don't have to point this out to you, a person living in the modern era, but oatmeal stouts are not fucking medicine. But hey, if a doctor told me the fastest way to convalesce was to drink a sixer of Schlafly oatmeal stout every day until I was all better, you better believe I'd listen. Of course people said it made them feel better. That's what alcohol does. Briefly, anyway. With the supposed support of the medical community behind them, oatmeal stouts retained some level of popularity after the pale beer boom of the mid to late 1800s. They stayed pretty popular into the 20th century, but they did fall off in the 50s, and they were all but extinct by the 1970s. You can thank our friends at Samuel Smith for bringing the style back to life in the early 80s, introducing it to a new generation of beer drinkers and future beer brewers. The style has become a staple of craft brewers the world over, and while people aren't as into it now as they were 10 years or so ago, it's still a pretty popular style, I think. So, let's talk about characteristic ingredients. I bet you can guess what at least one of them is. Let's see. They use pale caramel and dark roasted malts and grains. Hops are primarily used for bittering, not for flavor. They can contain brewing sugars or syrups. English ale yeast is traditional, and of course, oatmeal. Oatmeal or malted oats are used to enhance the fullness of body and complexity of flavor. Generally, the oats will account for anywhere from 5 to 20% of the grist. The grist being the crushed or milled grain before it's mixed with hot water to form the mash. Let's see. Oatmeal stout is described in the guide as being like a cross between an Irish extra stout and a sweet stout, but with oatmeal added. With all the variations in the style, some can come off like a sweet stout, while others lean more toward a drier, more nutty Irish extra stout. IBU ranges from 25 to 40. That won't be readily apparent in most examples of the style due to the presence of roast and its creamy mouthfeel. SRM is 22 to 40, which is dark brown to black and opaque. And the ABV goes from 4.2 to 5.9%. There are tons of commercial examples to try. You shouldn't have any trouble tracking one down. The Samuel Smith Oatmeal Stout is very good, as is the locally made Schlafly Oatmeal Stout. We are pairing New Holland's The Poet, but Rogue also makes one called Shakespeare Oatmeal Stout, so there's clearly something poetic about this beer style. Firestone Walker makes an excellent bourbon barrel-aged oatmeal stout called Velvet Merkin. If you don't know what a merkin is, I strongly advise you to do a Google image search on that one. And Great Divide used to make a good oatmeal variant of their Yeti Imperial Stout. If they still make that one, you should buy it. All of the Yetis are good. And if you can't find any of those, I guarantee that you can find a different oatmeal stout in your area that is worth a taste. I'm going to take a break. We'll come back with our segment on homebrewing. We'll see if Thomas has ever brewed an oatmeal stout. It would not surprise me if he has.